Today feels a lot better than yesterday. Yesterday I wasn't in a good shape emotionally, and I felt out of sorts and kind of groggy after I'd been into town and saw just how creepy it was. It was pure 1984. Today I feel a bit better, mainly because we're starting to get some truth about this at last. Even my old man, who would not be given to conspiracies or anything like that, is now sending me links showing it's bullshit, the whole pandemic. And that's the change. That's the positive side of it. That it's woken up. Well, it's woken up some people that were not woke up before to just how much lies the media spins on behalf of governments and corporations, and how much damage they do to society through the machinations of their news, their tidings, and how the telly box is not is the enemy and not the friend. It's the friend of the politician and the globalist, but not of the people. Now, the Jack Roberts, a friend of mine, who's also the one of the legendary figures of Irish megalithic expert discovery and investigation back in the day. He wrote something on my wall the other day that at the end of everything is just statistics, and he's absolutely right. The digital gene is expressed at the very top of the world by statistics, and they use numbers to as a kind of a form of black sorcery against the population, unemployment numbers, murder rates, and of course this whole thing, when you look at it, it's really been about numbers, hasn't it? It has been about statistics. It has been about sums. And that's because governments function like actuaries. If you ever work for a pensions company, you have to deal with people who are actuaries. And actuaries are kind of strange people. What their job is basically is to work out when you're going to die and then find a financial package based on you and society coming to a financial arrangement mutually agreeable to both before you go tits up. And that's how governments now run societies. They run through not through philosophical mandates or anything like that anymore. Purely statistical projections. Reduce carbon emissions by this much, get inflation down to this much, and these projections are purely from the left-brained scientific mind, and this is not a robotic thing, and it's ultimately self-defeating, and this is how I think there's such a high suicide rate among actuaries. It's one of the professions that has one of the highest suicide rates, and so it's part of a suicidal culture. Now, the statistics thing can be played with in any way, so that the sorcery of numbers can be manipulated. It's like is the glass half empty or half full? Well, depending on what they're trying to tell you in terms of this make you up pandemic, it's half empty. And this is how, in terms of someone who's looking at the real thing, the real news, that working out for themselves by thinking it's half full. There's no pandemic. In fact, none other than the prestigious Times of London today said that the coronavirus deaths will probably be less than the seasonal flu. After all that, one of the Irish government spooks experts yesterday at a press conference announced that the viral infection rate of Clyme has reduced by 20% overnight. It's down to 15%. In other words, it doesn't exist as a pandemic or a public health problem anymore. And then he spins it around to say, well, we don't have enough data yet. But they had enough data to enforce martial law on the whole planet. You see the glass half empty, the sorcery of numbers, the sorcery of the statistic. And, that's, there's not enough there's not enough data to let us go back to normal, but there's enough data to enforce martial laws and bring in emergency powers, which was always going to be the thing, no matter what the actual cause was. I believe it's an economic collapse, and it was also to try and disrupt Trump's election plans in the US by the Clinton neocons. Despite all that, ultimately it was about bringing in new powers. Now, we have on statute books all over the world, particularly in Europe, not so much in America. There's still a lot of freedom there, but in Europe anyway, the statutes books now have laws on them that will probably be never taken off. See, once you enact emergency powers, once you enact emergency powers, they don't they're either put to one side and pretend they don't exist. And this is why things like the witchcraft laws remained on the statute books in England until the late 50s, just in case they could use it. And they did use it a few times in World War II to shut down clairvoyants who they could accuse of being German spies. Now, and that's why they'll hold them there until there's, they're forgotten, or technology or advances in society have changed all that. So therefore, you have the tyranny, the sorcery of statistics being used over and over again in this. Now, we're being told X amount of people have it, and then you find out that the majority of these diagnoses are done over the phone. Now just think about that. Just think about the absurdity of most people who've been diagnosed with COVID-19 have been diagnosed over the phone by probably a doctor's assistant, a secretary, who had a checklist in front of her. Now, let's talk about the real statistics. All over this world right now, there are thousands of corpses inside houses. They didn't die of coronavirus. They died of suicide or murders. When the warm weather comes in and the smell comes back, or neighbours can visit their friends again, or family members and stuff like that, there slews of bodies will be found of fathers who flipped out and killed the whole family, mothers who poisoned all their children, and loads of people living lonely, alone, in isolation, topping themselves. That's what will happen there. And there will be they'll find that the BBC or some other news program is playing in front of them that had just filled them full of despondency and put them over the edge, and they decided to finish themselves. On top of that, there will be people who died of strokes we don't know about yet, heart attacks and coronaries, and also what about elderly people falling, this kind of thing. Even a younger person falling can die. I mean, a young girl that I know was only in her early 30s, had a fall from the bottom step of a flight of stairs and died. We were there, they haven't been found yet. Heroin addicts. What about heroin addicts? A lot of them are going to commit suicide because they won't be able to get their fix. And it just goes on and on and on. And these are the real statistics of this pandemic, which the Times of London is now saying wasn't a pandemic. And it's almost like they mock us, doesn't it? It's almost like they're mocking and they haha, just joking, fuck you. Now, then there'll be the whole rash of suicides to come of these people, these normies who have total faith in the system, and they stayed home and did everything Teleman told them to do, the expert from the government told them to do. And they think they're all going to go back to their jobs, their makey-up job in their corporation that doesn't exist anymore. And they'll go back and say, I'm going back to work on Monday, and they get a call from Human Resources, your job doesn't exist anymore. But you're going to get a lot of, and that's the Holocaust is this is the great culling. Statistics, the sorcery of numbers. They'll tell you how many they died of COVID-19. They won't tell you how many they murdered with their hysteria and panic. This is the real story, and this is also, they've hidden their powers that on the statute books they've secretly put in. I've been reading about Hungary, how Orbán there has basically implemented a dictatorship with incredible sweeping powers. I mean, it really is a Reichstag fire sale, the whole thing. That's really what this pandemic should be called, the second Reichstag fire sale. And these implementations of these these statutes that will probably be never taken off the books, or will just be held in the background just in case. And we don't know if this. I'm not going to say the stuff we're hearing about Hungary is true, because the media hates Hungary anyway, because they don't want to become an Islamic state like the rest of us are becoming. So they have a vendetta against them. So I'm treating these reports coming out of Hungary with a pinch of salt. I'd like to see just how much more autocratic Oban's implementations are compared to, say, what's going on here in Ireland, with our progressive, woke, multiracial, multiliberal, diverse government who probably implemented just as draconian laws, but because, our government is obsessed with turning us into Muslims, they'll get off nicely compared to him. So I want to know the real truth there. We don't know yet. We don't know. And so don't be jumping on those things assuming they're automatically right. They could also be used as deflections, like, oh look, Hungary's just implemented a police state, and meanwhile you're sitting in a police state, but you only think Hungary has done that. So you have to be careful with all these kind of things. Statistics, sums, numbers, spellbound with spin, and the spin will be off the scale when this thing ends. Like I said, they'll have big celebration concerts, and the governments are. I can already see with the government here in Ireland, they're already working on their self-congratulatory, backslapping, aren't we amazing, exit strategy from this fake pandemic. So this is why I was making these more videos than usual and putting up lots of funny memes and stuff like that, because I knew that there was going to be people who are going to be going to deep depression. And that to me is dark sorcery. When you take people that are otherwise happy and you inflict depression on them, you have put black magic on them through your sorcery of statistics and hype. So that's why I did all that, was to just, I know I could see dark sorcery when it was coming. And boy, if you ever want to know, if anyone ever asked you in the future, can you give me an example of black magic and how it works? You point out to this COVID-19 pandemic. There's your answer. That's how black people turned against their will by the will of the dark brotherhoods. And I'm using that word. I'm not using that there is a dark brotherhood. I'm using those terms just as a flowery language thing. The globalists. And most of the globalists aren't really in charge or don't know what they're doing. And you could see, like, when this thing really started taking off, it worked so well for them that you could see that they were almost surprised themselves at how well it worked. That it was like, whoa, we're getting away with this. It was almost like that kind of thing. And like I said, you can't deal with these normies who think it's all going to be amazing and everything, and they're going to go back to normal, and their governments have been very honest and direct with them. There's no hope for them. They're not ready for anything. But the great news is that those of us who made it through with our sanity and our sense of humor and our humanity intact, that we're looking at something a lot more positive now. We've learned how to smell the roses amongst all this peace and quiet. We've learned how to adapt and enjoy the stillness of the night. And like I said in the video I made yesterday on Open Source Occult TV, it's improved our psychic state. We'll find, our things like dreams and our connection to the landscape are enriching. And, people who are probably poetically inclined and haven't written a poem in years will be writing poems. We'll have some great songs that will come out of this, and some great ideas for films and everything else that, like, the artists of the future will be creating during this time of stillness. We've been given a gap, of parentheses in the noise, and we're fine. We'll do well. We'll be okay by it. And no matter what, even if the worst, most outrageous prediction or scenario of a comet hitting us comes true, remember, you'll be reincarnated on other worlds and in this world and other lives, or your own life all over again. It doesn't end here. There's no death. There's only a renewal. And so always remember that. Always. But the thing is that you should stay in this life as much as you can, and because you're in a learning process. You're an element of the universe looking back at itself, building itself, and always remember that. And what kind of universe do you want to build going forward? One that suits you or one that suits them? And you'd be told, oh, you're being selfish, wrapping the world around you. But I got news for you. There's a reason why 2-year-olds wrap the world around themselves. It's because they're able to make control of it. So when they put them in school, they lose control of it. There's nothing wrong with wrapping the world around yourself. Once you're not selfish about other people's needs or lose your compassion, but there's nothing wrong with that. It's because you are an element of this. You are one of the whole. You are, you're beyond comprehension in terms of your your spiritual and your psychic destiny within this universe. And you always remember that. Always remember that. If we were just meat and robots, we wouldn't have things like art and poetry and romance and love and all those things that make life wonderful. You wouldn't have those special feelings you get when you look at your children or your pets. Why would you have that when you look at your pets? They're not part of your DNA. There's a bond there that goes beyond what the actuaries of the control grid want you to believe in. Eyes on the prize. Talk soon.